Greetings everyone and welcome to Spacing Out. I'm Jason McClellan.
And I'm Maureen Elsberry. Thanks for joining us.
You're probably aware that Area 51 has been in the news this past week. Documents recently re-released by the CIA now acknowledge the secret base by name. We'll talk about that in a bit, but first let's talk about some of the other news stories that have made headlines recently.
Amateur astronomer Alan Epling captured photos and video of a strange cigar-shaped UFO in the sky above Pike County, Kentucky in October of 2012. The sighting received widespread media attention. Weeks later, local media then reported that the UFO was simply a toy solar balloon.
Many questioned the assertion that this UFO was a mere solar balloon, and people were left wondering about the object's true identity. But apparently Google's Rich Duvall knows what it was. Wired reports, sitting in a conference room in Mountain View, California, he beams proudly as he runs a YouTube clip of one of the newscasts. The mysterious craft was his doing, or at least the work of his Google team. The people in Pike County were witnessing a test of Project Loon, a breathtaking, ambitious plan to bring the internet to a huge swath of as-yet unconnected humanity via thousands of solar-powered, high-pressure balloons floating some 60,000 feet above Earth.
Google describes Project Loon balloons float in the stratosphere twice as high as airplanes in the weather. They are carried around the Earth by winds, and they can be steered by rising or descending to an altitude with winds moving in the desired direction. People connect to the balloon network using a special internet antenna attached to their building. The signal bounces from balloon to balloon, then to the global internet back on Earth.
Although Project Loon was just unveiled on June 15, 2013 at a press conference in New Zealand, the project has reportedly been in development for 2 years. So it is conceivable that what Alan Epling saw over Kentucky in 2012 was a Project Loon balloon. Google asserts that the Kentucky UFO remained aloft for 11 days, then wound up in Canada.
Epling himself had acknowledged that the aerial object he observed could have been a balloon, but he also described the UFO as being stationary, hovering for 2 hours in the sky. Whether Project Loon balloons have the ability to hover in the same location for hours is unclear, but Google does explain that unlike weather balloons, Loon balloons are super pressure, which enable them to stay aloft for 100+ days at a time. This is far longer than typical weather balloons, which last for a matter of hours. Loon balloons are also unique in that they're steerable and entirely solar-powered.
A witness recorded video of 2 objects in the sky above the Basilica of St. Mary in Minneapolis, Minnesota on the night of August 9th.
According to the report he filed the next day with the Mutual UFO Network, the witness explains that he was walking in Loring Park on his way to downtown Minneapolis when he noticed the 2 UFOs hovering in the night sky.
He explains, "At first I didn't pay much attention to them, as I thought it was just helicopters perhaps. But then one looked like it was sort of checking out the Basilica. I'm not sure how far away they were, so it may have just been a quirk of viewpoint and unrelated to the Basilica."
The witness took out his Galaxy Note 2 smartphone and recorded more than 4 minutes of video showing the UFOs over Minneapolis. He describes that the objects hovered back and forth and each UFO appeared to have dual-colored lights. He doesn't know what he saw, but in his report to MUFON, he states that he is inclined to think that they were man-made.
He explains, "I think it was probably something of terrestrial origin and something either testing out some kind of, say, drone or something, or putting on a show of some sort with RC craft. They kind of reminded me of those small automated drones from some of the universities you see videos of doing synchronized flying, that or perhaps small RC craft, but silent. At first I thought there might be some sort of propeller sound, but it was just downtown noise. As I made my way downtown, no one else seemed to have noticed anything. It was busy downtown."
KMSP Fox 9 looked into the sighting by contacting the Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport and the FAA. Neither had received any sighting reports, nor had local law enforcement agencies, but Fox 9 also spoke with a man who suggests remote-controlled quadcopters as possible identification for the UFOs. Tanner Becken, who works at Hobby Warehouse, told Fox 9 that the store has sold 40 quadcopters in just the past 6 months.
The quadcopter Becken showed to Fox 9 featured 2 colors of LED lights, which matches the witness's dual-color description.
An alleged UFO sighting on Monday, August 5th at a condo complex in Naples, Florida generated widespread attention and controversy about its possible identification.
Security camera footage showed different blobs and anomalies over and around the swimming pool at the condo complex, which resulted in many headlines about a UFO over a swimming pool. The Florida chapter of the Mutual UFO Network was contacted about the sighting by a local NBC affiliate. So I spoke with MUFON State Director for Florida, Morgan Beal, to find out more about this case. Well, Morgan, first of all, I've got to say, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty surprised by how much attention this story really got. It was kind of just took off with media outlets around the world. But first, if you would, give us an overview of the details of this case.
Yeah, it actually is pretty simple. In fact, I didn't get notice about the case until somebody had emailed me and asked me if I had seen this. And they sent me a link to the original news segment from NBC2 News on, I think, on the 8th, actually. It actually occurred on the 7th, and they had immediately sent it into the media outlet, which then immediately contacted our headquarters, the MUFON headquarters in Ohio. And initial comments were made, and sort of the media drove it home, and they kind of, I think, over-exaggerated the video itself. The media did. And so they were waiting for our analysis, and so we had a little bit of delay time between our analysis and their coverage, and so the coverage continued, and it actually went viral, not only in one account, but if you added it all up, there was well over 1 million tags on this story all over the country and probably the world. It ended up on YouTube hundreds of times, and people kept recycling the video. And of course, a lot of claims were made about the video. Now, actually, the original witness really didn't make any, concise claims about it, other than that they didn't really agree with our analysis. That it was, and we'll probably get that here in a few minutes, but everything was being claimed from people online, everything from angels to UFOs recharging their 0-point energy systems through the pool water, and I'm being serious. People were really being serious about that. My first thought when I first saw it was actually that it was likely rain or something on the lens. And because I've seen this quite often, I see this all the time and reviewing CCTV camera footage, monitoring CCTV camera footage over long periods of time. You see all kinds of strange things because the cameras do emit light. As you can see in the images and the video, it actually emits an IR light that you cannot see with your eye. But there's also other light sources. You have the pool lights. You have the lights around the pool, around the beach, or around the water area behind the pool area. So there's a lot of factors, including weather that night. I looked up the weather. I was able to determine that it did rain. I live very close, actually, to this location, probably less than an hour. And so I kind of knew what the weather was like, and it's typical Florida summer weather where we have these rain squalls and evening thunderstorms on the hour, every hour.
So contrary to popular belief, it actually rains in Florida?
Yeah, it's the sunshine state for some reason.
Right.
I haven't quite figured that one out yet. So, but yeah, so, there was a lot of factors involved, and really the explanation was the more simple explanation, which was simply a water droplet on the protective lens of the dome camera system that they had set up there.
I had the same reaction as you did when I initially saw this, because I've seen this so many times with water droplets, dust, and other things on the lens. And with the camera, when you watch the video, many times through the video, you can see the camera trying to focus on the object that appears to be on the lens or the housing and objects in the distance. You can see that the camera fighting with itself, trying to figure out what to focus on. So to me, it seemed pretty straightforward, but this thing just spiraled out of control. And then the witness, I guess the security guard at this condo complex, then, like you said, started disputing the findings or the opinions offered by MUFON, by Mark D'Antonio, and saying that she saw it with her own eyes, and that caused media outlets to run with that quote too, and kind of taking it out of context or misinterpreting it, I guess.
Right. She saw it with her own eyes through the computer screen.
Right. Right.
And it's real simple to test a hypothesis and utilizing scientific method. People often mistake science as a philosophy, and it's not. It's actually a process, and people misinterpret that, and so they think we're being skeptical or we're trying to disprove them, when all we're doing is testing the original hypothesis, which is that everybody thinks it's a UFO, or everybody thinks it's something else other than a normal explanation or a natural cause. So when we test the hypothesis and end up finding out that it's in fact the most likely, and we always say most likely, we don't know definitively unless we test it. Of course, we didn't have access to the camera system. We didn't have access to the witnesses, so it wasn't your typical MUFON assessment. And so we had to do with what we had, which was limited. And we simply, all they have to do is put water on the lens with a little bit of wind, and then test that hypothesis to see if they can come up with a similar effect. And it's not hard, but just from with what we had, our assessment, we feel we're fairly accurate about it. And look, we're not out there to try to disprove everybody and say, UFOs aren't real and, we're trying to find an explanation for everything. No, that's just scientific method. It has nothing to do with our belief or whether we believe that they're real or not, or if they're alien or if they're from another dimension. It has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with us using the scientific method and testing our hypothesis, our original hypothesis, which is testing it with null hypotheses, which in this case was water on the lens was one of the null hypotheses. We had to test that. There were other items that we were testing as well. We thought, maybe, it could have been, other items like a bug or everything we kind of tried to rule out. But we ended up coming up with the best hypothesis, and we wrote the report accordingly, or Mark D'Antonio and Cindy Costello, our analysts. And they did a pretty good job in just simply putting out the facts of what they see based off of their experience, because that's all we had to go on. And so it was a limited report, but nonetheless, a very simple video. And it brings us to the real story. Actually, there's two. One is being the coverage and the public's interest in this subject matter, which is extraordinary. But at the same time, the media and the public in general tend to ignore the really cool cases and the really, good evidence that is out there in videos. I mean, MUFON just put out the top 10 that had some pretty exciting video in it, but no one cares about that. They care about,
angels and spider webs over a pool.
Yeah, and so, I'm working on a case out of Miami with a few other investigators right now where we have extraordinarily good video from this witness who practices this all the time in his backyard because he's retired and he's got some time, and so he does a lot of work with cameras and telescopes, and he finally had caught something that he couldn't explain. And when you have these contexts, like in this case where somebody just happens to come across some video on their security camera while they're sitting there standing it and they never really actually witnessed it, versus somebody who's witnessed an event, picked up a camera or some sort of imaging system and actually recorded the event that they also witnessed, is two different things.
Right.
It's, and the most common thing I think you're probably used to seeing is the photographs. People, they're just snapping random photographs and then later they find a UFO in it. Well, that could be anything. That could be a bird, bug. It could be, dust or debris in front of the camera. You don't know that. The most significant cases are the actual eyewitnesses along with the, qualitative, nonetheless, data with the images or the video. But the story here is that the amount of interest in the subject matter, and it's really showing through nowadays, especially with social networking and the viral videos, that there's a lot of people out there that are very interested in the subject matter, and a lot of them have never heard of MUFON or organizations or open minds, and so now they're starting to look, wow, we have all these resources, so we try to take advantage of these situations by educating the public about our process. And, that's why we had to get this report out really quickly and disseminate it as fast as we could. And just to show that, look, we're really taking this seriously. But, here's some other stuff to look at, too. We want the public to know that there's actually some other cool stuff out there that they can look at.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And you're right. Despite how silly this case seems, it did generate some good publicity, I think, for MUFON Florida, and I think you guys did a good job with it, so way to go there. And thanks for taking the time to walk me through this case here. I wanted to get your take on it and hear directly from you because you were involved in it. So thanks for taking the time, Morgan. I appreciate it.
Not a problem. Thank you for having me on.
As we mentioned at the top of the show, Area 51 made more than a few headlines last week and this week. On Thursday, August 15th, the National Security Archives at George Washington University posted a document obtained through Freedom of Information, or FOIA request, that officially acknowledges the existence of Area 51.
Although this isn't the first official document to reference Area 51, this story was reported by major media outlets around the world. With more on this story, we're joined by Alejandro Rojas. Alejandro, thanks for joining us.
Hello.
Well, why don't you give us a brief overview of what was actually released in this new document?
Yeah, it's significant in that This document has been seen before, but the term Area 51 was always redacted. So this is officially, essentially declassifying the term Area 51, which is essentially acknowledging Area 51. It has been, because it's the name of the base, so engineers have been talking about it that have worked there. They refer to it as Area 51, but the name has always been kind of hidden by the CIA. There have been some official government documents out there that refer to Area 51 through other agencies other than the CIA. So really, this is kind of the official outing of Area 51. So it's kind of funny. It's probably the most popular U.S. Air Force base ever internationally, but it's been unacknowledged, and now finally it's acknowledged.
You mentioned that Area 51's been referred to in other documents previously, and you recently spoke with John Greenwald about that, right?
Yeah, right. John Greenwald, he runs the Black Vault. He's a FOIA expert. He's been doing FOIA requests for a long time. He's got a huge amount of government documents. And a couple of documents that he has, which I think is pretty significant, that reference Area 51, is one that talks about the Energy Department, who used to own Area 51, and they would do testing on like nuclear bombs and stuff. They have a document where they handed the base essentially over to the Air Force, and they called it Area 51 before they gave it to the Air Force and the CIA to use. The other document is pretty interesting too, because it talks about in 1962 flying a U-2. The National Reconnaissance Office is who wrote this document, flying a U-2 spy plane over Area 51. And the reason is that Russia had been launching the Sputnik satellites, and they didn't know the capabilities of Sputnik. And they figured, if Sputnik has a camera on it, we'll fly a U-2 over the base to see what that camera might see so that they can hide stuff and things like that. So, but that left the name Area 51 open. The title of the document even talks about, you know, aerial reconnaissance over Area 51.
Well, speaking of the U-2, they were claiming that after this came out that it was causing a lot of UFO sightings, which of course is an obvious factor, but then they said that it was actually what caused the formation of Project Blue Book, which is actually incorrect, you pointed out.
Yeah, they were way overstating that claim. The U-2, of course, it did create UFO sightings. Some people doubt that because they're like, U-2 that looks like a plane, but at the time, nothing flew that high. So commercial jets were flying at about 40,000 feet. U-2 was at 60,000 feet. So if a commercial plane sees something flying above it, you know, 20,000 feet, glittering in the sun, that's going to be weird, and they're going to think, well, nothing should be flying that high. What is that? So it would generate UFO reports. Now, the document states that 50% of all UFO reports were due to the U-2. And furthermore, it says Project Blue Book was started because of these sightings. These U-2 flights were in the late 50s. Project Blue Book started in 1951, and of course there were two prior projects investigating UFOs by the Air Force prior to that, starting in 1947. So UFO reports had been coming, you know, hot and heavy in the early 50s before the U-2 ever took to the skies. So it certainly didn't account for the creation of Project Blue Book, although it probably did create a lot of UFO reports.
We talked about this, how silly it was, but most of the headlines were about this story were saying how the documents didn't say anything about UFOs, and as you just mentioned, there's a section in there specifically about UFOs and how the U-2 caused UFO sightings, so that was pretty funny. But while I've got you here, I want to get your opinion on this story about Google coming forward and claiming responsibility for the sighting last year by Alan Epling in Kentucky. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's interesting in that, you know, I think if you make a claim like that, especially when you see the pictures and the pictures don't fit exactly what the balloon is, and with the witness testimony of the object being there for a period of time, you've kind of got to justify what you're saying. And maybe they do have some justification. You know, they had tracking, they were tracking our balloon was in that spot during that period of time. That would be helpful. But they're kind of just saying, you have to take our word for it, that was our balloon. Right. And that's, you know, you got to give more than that. And it does lead to speculation that maybe they're claiming it was their balloon just for a publicity stunt, because it has generated some news about their balloon program by making this claim.
Well, nobody really knew about Project Balloon until they claimed that this was the basis for this UFO sighting.
And that's sort of how they made the announcement. And even the, oh, I forget which network it is, but the network that initially broke the Alan Epling story, the initial sighting, they went back and talked to Alan Epling after this news broke, and they even assert the claim that Google could be using this as a publicity stunt.
Yeah, I
just
think it's
latching onto a UFO sighting because it just happened to be the same time that we learned about Project Loon.
Yeah, it's like a Kentucky news organization, but you're right, they seem skeptical of Google's claims.
And even Alan Epling, he says he entertains the idea that it could be a balloon. And looking at it, yeah, it absolutely could. But I don't know enough about balloons to know if a balloon could stay stationary in the sky for 2 hours, as the witness claims. And who knows if these Project Loon balloons can do that. But you said they really offered nothing to concretely prove that that was their balloon. And another thing that bothers me with this is the fact that during that sighting, the FAA and airports around there were contacted about that UFO. And all of them had no idea what was in the sky. And Project Loon people claim that they always keep FAA and the areas apprised when they're testing their balloons.
That's a great point.
I think we're going to have to see a lot more evidence from them that this is specifically their balloon, like you were saying. But also what I saw this morning was now they are recruiting volunteers to test out this system in California. So I think we're going to see a whole bunch more UFO sighting reports of these balloons.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see. I mean, I would like to see what they actually look like at high altitude, because we've just seen the promotional videos that they've released so far, and you see the balloons lifting off the ground, and they're not fully inflated, and who knows? I mean, they could take on this cylindrical form. I don't know.
Right.
Hopefully we see some of that footage.
Yep.
Well, Alejandro, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
That's all for this episode of Spacing Out. Be sure to visit openminds.tv for all the latest news. And if you're a podcast listener, go to openminds.tv/radio and check out Open Minds UFO Radio. You can also find Open Minds UFO Radio on iTunes.
Make sure to click on the like button if you enjoyed today's show, and remember to subscribe to our channel so you know when we post new content. Thanks again for joining us today. I'm Maureen Elsberry.
And I'm Jason McClellan. We will see you in the future.